Hi, I'm Femi OK. You're watching the stream Home Edition. Of course, I don't need to tell you that the coronavirus pandemic started in Wuhan, China, but now China is just getting out from all of its lockdown mandates. And it's fascinating to see what lockdown life lessons we can learn as the rest of us are coming out of those stay-at-home mandates. How is China going to lead the way? That is our conversation for today. If you're in our YouTube chat, hello, welcome. Nice to see you. If you have a question, you have a comment, you have stories to share, go ahead, drop them in the YouTube chat, and hopefully I'll be able to bring them into the stream. Let me bring you and introduce you to our guests. Hello, Katrina. Tell everybody who you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katrina Yu. I am the Al Jazeera correspondent in China. Travel around China. I'm based here in Beijing, and I've lived in Beijing for about 7 years now. And I'm originally from Sydney, Australia.
Great to have you, Katrina, in the stream. Hello, Ya Chu. Great to have you. Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Hi, I'm Ya Wang. I'm a researcher for Human Rights Watch. I research and write about human rights issues in China. I'm in New York City right now, the new epicenter of the virus.
Thanks for coming to the stream. Appreciate it. And to see you have got so many stories, I know. Tell everybody who you are. Welcome to the stream.
To be sure, hello everyone. My name is Xi. I'm an information technology scientist in London. I've lived in London for over 7 years. I was born in China, so this time I was visiting my parents in Wuhan just 2 days before the lockdown of Wuhan city. And then I got trapped here until now. So I'm still in Wuhan, sending this message out to you guys.
We're looking forward to hearing your Wuhan stories, but let me start first of all with Katrina. Katrina, what is different in your life today that you never would have imagined would be the norm for you now that China is beginning to get out of these lockdown mandates? What's your life like now?
Well, every day in China now you have to go out and have a mask on. If you don't have a mask on, you feel naked. You feel exposed. You know that something's wrong. You have to have a mask. Everywhere you go, you expect to have your temperature taken. Sometimes by people who are very serious about it, sometimes by people who are not too serious about it, but you have to have it taken. You have to put your details down in some sort of form, or either through a written form or through a mobile phone app. When you go to a restaurant, when you go to a cafe, when you go into a mall. And I think that's just so that if something does happen and there's a case and that person went to that area, they know who else was there and they can contact trace everyone as well. Every time I have a guest over for anything and they have to register, I have to show authorities, scan a barcode, which shows authorities where I've been in the last 2 weeks. And people get very nervous if they can see from this barcode if I've left Beijing city, because they'd want to know where I am, where I came from, have I done the right quarantine, and am I for the coronavirus, basically.
To see it, you're in Wuhan. Can you move around freely now?
Yes, of course. We actually were allowed to move freely. I think like over 2 to 3 months ago. However, at that time, the lockdown of Wuhan city is not fully lifted yet, which means that we couldn't go out of the city by that moment. Since then, we can just move freely in the city, but of course, we need to check our body temperature from time to time and logging our the travel history and also the green code system. Let's say the traffic light system, as Katrina just mentioned. And by now, we are just we can just travel just as normal. Well, in fact, tomorrow I'm going out of Wuhan city to visit my grandparents in another city in Hubei. Of course, not out of the Hubei province, but still out of Wuhan city. So let's say, I'm getting kind of exciting about it, but also a little bit nervous because it's been over 120 days, maybe 125 days. So I think it could be a very different, experience.
What does it feel like to just be able to go out and
Mm.
about, go and see your elderly relatives? Certainly in other parts of the world, we're told we can't go and see our grandparents or our mothers or our fathers because we may actually
Mm.
be the cause of them getting COVID-19. But there you are
Yeah.
planning a trip to see a relative. What does that feel
Mm.
like?
Oh, it feels it's a very it's very challenging to say that because we just made a decision tonight. So I think you four guys, maybe the other viewers in front of the YouTube, the first batch of people just know the news. But anyway, it's like I'm kind of being holding myself back because I'm still worried about because well, in the very beginning, everybody was in panic, in chaos because no one knew this virus before. We took it very seriously, which is very good, right? But we thought it was as deadly as SARS, or maybe even more deadly as SARS. Then later we understood this virus more. It's more related to, let's say, there is no insult or anything, any bias issue. But this is the fact. It's more related to the elder people, and then the people with the chronic diseases, which is
Huh.
of course the truth. So I'm kind of let's say afraid of meeting the elder generations at the moment. Even though I knew I'm I'm triple negatives because I just ran the test already,
Okay.
and so as my parents. But I'm still kind of myself back.
Let me let me just bring in Yachu. Yachu, this
Yeah.
idea of this health code, can you describe it to us? Because it sounds very science fiction like you. So do you want to explain what you understand is happening now with people having a code that is a different color and being able to go around China with this code and how it helps them? How do you understand it from a human rights perspective?
I think probably Katrina and she can, tell us the experience of real experience of using it. But from a human rights perspective, I mean, you input information of where you've been, who have been you've been in contact with, and other some basic biometric information. Then they will generate a code for you, red, green, and yellow. However, our concern is that. First of all, the algorithm, uh, the color is determined is not known to the public. So there's no way you can know why you're getting this color. Secondly, there's no way for you to appeal. There's no mechanism to review. So if you get a code that you don't think you should get, then there's no channels for you to seek redress. So those are the human rights concerns of the app.
Let me just bring in you, Katrina. I'm actually looking at your Twitter account here. Shanghai's Disneyland reopens as China reports 17 new coronavirus cases, the most significant uptick since the end of April. Despite fears of a second wave of infections, entry tickets for today sold out in 3 minutes. People wanting to go to Shanghai
Right.
Disneyland. You reported on that story, and we've got pictures of people with their masks, not
Right.
hugging Mickey, but they were out there. What does that tell you about the
Right.
mindset of people right now? Do they just need to play?
I think so. I think, the analyst that we spoke to about this, she said there's just this pent up demand, I guess. I think people for months, about 3 months, they were at home. And, people in Wuhan City, I mean, as we've just heard, they weren't able to leave their front doors in some cases or their compounds for so many days. And not only that, I mean, in places like Beijing and Shanghai, where there was more freedom, you didn't have as strict a lockdown. But I mean, everywhere, all these entertainment venues were closed. There was nowhere to socialize. There was nowhere to gather, to be with people. So I think, seeing what a success this open day this was, people rushing for Disneyland. I think people are still afraid, for sure. They are still worried about the second wave of infections. But at the same time, people are just kind of tired, as they are around the world. They want to go out and live their life again. And certainly, I mean, there is a certain level of trust here in the government. And if the government has sanctioned the opening of Disneyland, of all places, then people believe that it must mean that it's safe enough to go to Disneyland. And if that's the case, why not? Especially for parents who have nowhere to bring their children, especially young children who aren't able to attend school or anything like that. I mean, I'm sure they're jumping at some opportunity to find a way to entertain their children after such a long time.
Couple of questions on YouTube. I'm going to throw them to you, Katrina, but to see if you've got a take as well, I'd love to hear that. When will they open the borders, Katrina, was one question that came to us from YouTube.
Open the borders, as in the national borders of China. Is that what they're... Yeah. Well, okay. So this is one of the things I was thinking with your first question, Femi, how life has changed. I mean, I guess everyone around the world never thought that our ability to travel would be ever taken away from us, especially I'm an Australian living in China, and I never thought that I would have to think twice about leaving the country because I wouldn't be able to come back. As it is now, foreigners are still denied entry into China because of a fear of imported cases, even though 90% of imported cases are, all of them now are foreign nationals coming back into China. There are so many foreigners. There was just a local magazine here in Beijing who did just a really rough straw poll of people, expats, usually in Beijing, and 1/3 of them said that they were stuck outside the country. So we've heard rumors that the government is discussing opening the borders up to foreigners in July. Now, that's so far just a rumor, and I expect that will depend on a variety of things, whether there is, in fact, a second wave of infections, what happens around the world as well.
To see, I've got to bring you in here because you arrived in Wuhan 2 days before lockdown. Unbelievable timing. You have family back in the UK. When are you going home to see? When can you go home?
Well, it's very challenging to say that. 2 days before the lockdown. Well, by that time, I already knew the situation was very dangerous because I know I knew this information. And things are getting very difficult by the middle of January. So I kind of made a decision like if things went really worse, really bad. So I had to be with my parents at that very difficult time. However, my wife, she's still in the UK.
What does your wife say to you about when you're coming home?
At that moment, she couldn't even talk.
She's like, actually, I'm here by myself. When are you coming back?
I have to repeat the first time of coming back because today is a coincidentally, I'm coming back again. I just rebooked the tickets back to London, which is crazier than the first time, isn't it? But it's just very difficult. I don't have any choices. I understand that the situation in Wuhan is kind of under the control, and my parents are handling it very well. They've got enough experience. But what about my wife? And I also need to go back to work. So it's very difficult to say if it is completely safe for me to travel back. But I should spare like another 2-3 weeks time.
See, you make a really good point. Excuse me for jumping in. To see the idea of going back to work it's really important. The idea of the economy, and that's been the concern not just of China but countries around the world who've locked down. Now they're opening up. Katrina, I know that you a small business owner in Beijing, and this is what he told you about now that the businesses are open. Let's take a look at that comment and that little interview you did with him.
Empty chairs and empty tables. This Beijing restaurant once served 200 customers every day, but because of the coronavirus pandemic, it's now struggling to survive. Owner Zhou Tao was forced to close the US-themed diner for almost 3 months.
There's no cash flow if we aren't open. and cash flow is the most important thing for a restaurant. We are still paying for the rent and staff wages, plus their accommodation in Beijing. We've taken a really big hit.
How are businesses doing, Katrina?
It's tough times. I think many businesses are struggling to survive. And if they have made it this far, the next few months may be the last few months for them. The government is rolling out some targeted measures. They've made it easier, for example, for people to get bank loans. They've also said that they've put some extensions on people's repayments or rent payments. The government here are trying as much as possible to encourage businesses to retain staff, because the last thing they want to see is a vast number of people unemployed, because that would be a risk for social stability or social instability, which is the last thing that they want to see. So they're trying to support these small businesses. But at the same time, so many have gone under. This Chinese New Year was already supposed to be a quiet time. And after that, people were really relying on this rush of people coming back. And even now, I think people are slowly going back to restaurants and things, but it's the last few months were basically just too difficult to bear for some small businesses, especially when you consider in Beijing there are a lot of migrant workers, and as we interviewed this restaurant owner, he doesn't only pay wages, he also pays for the food and lodging of his staff as well. So there's so many costs, and there's just not enough people going back out to the restaurants in the evening. People are going back to work, but in terms of people going out to have fun, that's still not back levels.
There's something I want to show everybody to see, and that is your Quarantine Wuhan Facebook page. You became a resource, somewhere where people could post about their stories. I'm going to show it right here. So this was the idea. It's a private group now, so they have to ask your permission to join it. So the idea was this: you were posting first of all, then everybody else was posting, so you shared them. And information like, I'm seeing reports that China's experiencing a second wave. Everybody is weighing in there with their experiences. And then this I'm finding absolutely fascinating. Some pictures of things opening up and how they're opening up very differently. Look at this restaurant. Look how people are sitting. Here, space here, sitting here, space here. Look how people are paying for items. Again, these are fascinating pictures. Maybe the idea of this is what may be coming in other parts around the world. To see, are there any other things that you've seen which is so different post lockdown that you want to warn us about?
The posts in the quarantine Wuhan, the Facebook group, and also the previous story from Katrina. I still want to mention that about the second wave, because there's apparently a question about the second wave's coming, and there's more 17 cases, local cases, not imported cases in China. Well, actually, yesterday in Wuhan, there were 6 more local cases, new cases, which means that I think to normalize this situation, to take it as a part of our daily routine, could be part of life in the future, and the people need to still stay vigilant the whole time. Like, for example, taking temperature every time, of course, washing your hands, and wearing mask at the public transport or some dense areas or indoor areas, restaurants. This could be a very normal situation in the future. And I still want to send out another message is about social distancing isn't that a very bad thing. It's not completely all negatives, because we can still save more energy and time with our families, and the friends we want to share. You see what I mean? Sometimes you have to go out with some particular kinds of friends and spend some unnecessary time with them. And then in that case, you always have a very good excuse to get away from them, right? And I know that it is very super normal in China. So still some very good thing.
Yeah, Q, I was just looking at your Twitter feed here, and one of the things you're doing is looking at the human rights issues that are coming out of China. You have not stopped critiquing the Chinese government regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not a pandemic. I'm looking here about, you're talking about Chinese government unveiled measures requiring sectors to extend the same treatment to all from home and abroad. You are talking here about the xenophobia that seems to have been enhanced because of the coronavirus pandemic. How do you continue to do your work when you know that a country is struggling with coming out of lockdown, struggling with how do we keep our citizens safe and healthy? How do you pick your moments? Do you need to pick your moments to critique China?
Well, I mean, China to an extent has successfully contained the virus, but we have to, know that China has a very sophisticated censorship system. So there are a lot of, there are successful stories the government is propagated, but there's also a lot of sufferings and that are being censored, that are being repressed. As a researcher on human rights issues, I have been in daily contact with people who have lost their families in the pandemic, who have suffered terribly. So those stories needs to be heard regardless of time. In Wuhan now, Katrina was saying that people are, they want to go to Disneyland because there's this painted, I want to go out. However, I'm talking to people, they have experienced harassment, detention by the police because they wanted to seek redress because their family members died in the pandemic due to government negligence, due to government cover up. So the stories continue to go on. I've been talking to Africans in Guangzhou because the Guangzhou government in early April has implemented a policy to forcefully test Africans for the coronavirus, regardless whether they have been in contact with people who have been infected, regardless whether they have traveled outside of China. So this is a racist, discriminatory policy, and people are very upset. They are totally, feelings totally legitimate. So I don't think it's a moment saying when people are experiencing human rights abuses, they should tell their story, and their story should be known.
I'm going to ask Katrina to do a quick round of questions and answers. So Katrina, you can't pause, just answer, not a long answer, very quick. This is off YouTube. Lucy Liu,
Okay.
is the Chinese government telling the truth about the existing numbers? Cases, people who died, new cases?
Basically, short answer is we don't know. Unfortunately, we only have one source of figures for coronavirus cases in China, and that is the government. And of course, there is no independent inquiry around these numbers. We only know what they give us. And we do know that in the last few months, the method of counting cases has changed a number of times. For example, they weren't counting asymptomatic cases, or they were only counting
Katrina,
cases
remember,
with
this
nucleic
is the
acid.
speed round. Asthma
So-
A on YouTube has another question
we don't
for
know.
you.
We don't know.
China
Basically,
had
we don't
the
know.
best measures. This is what Asthma A says. China had the best measures to curb and curtail the spread of COVID-19. Does this have to do with self-discipline of its citizens?
Well, whether China had the best or not, that's really up for discussion. But definitely, there is a different culture and a different system here. It's an authoritarian system. The way people they're given very little choice and as Yacho mentioned, very little opportunity to argue. So when they're told or given a directive or a law from the government, they basically have no choice but to comply. So I don't know if that's down to culture. That's just the system, the way it is here. I'm sure there are cases of
And
people
also,
not complying, but we wouldn't hear about it.
and
Actually,
also
you've got
people
one
who
sentence
try
because we're at
to,
the end of the show. Go ahead.
people who try to criticize the government, or people who don't believe the government statistic, you can get detained or harassed by the police, by the government.
Yachu Wang,
That's
I
right.
didn't get detained,
Katrina, you.
by the way.
There's so much to talk about China post-lockdown. We're looking at China to see the examples. What can we learn? What should we avoid? What should we definitely do? Thank you, guests, for helping us understand that a little bit better. Thanks, YouTube. See you next time. Take care, everybody.